fact, I'd like to know how some of these groups are dealing with it. Um, I part of me wants to contact Red Cross or Red Crescent and talk to them and find out how are you managing all this stuff with multiple situations. But I know they're so busy and so under stress that I don't want to be hindering them, by me pulling somebody away to talk to them for 3 segments of 16 minutes, which is how the show is formatted. Those 3 16-minute segments, they could be helping somebody. So I think I'll wait to reach out, as part of lessons learned with them. How did you cope with this? How do you do things? Because all those groups still need to function, and they still need to help people out there. It's got to be traumatic for them, trying to live with COVID, away from their families who are living with COVID. I don't mean necessarily have COVID, but living in the times we do with COVID, while trying to help refugees fleeing war. The protection for everybody it's got to be very, very difficult for everyone. And again, people in those positions, I just commend unbelievably, how and how they do what they do and what they're doing. So let's see what else. Oh, we've got crisis management. Yeah, I love talking about crisis management, especially right now. Some people seem to be making their own crises by saying and doing things, and I'm not going to mention any names, but I'm sure you could probably figure out who some of these people are. When you say things that aren't true and you're not helping other people, or you I don't not necessarily misspeak, but intentionally convey the wrong information, in the hopes that you can pull the wool over people's eyes. Well, there's something I learned in crisis management a long time ago. When you do that, you just open yourself up to more questions. So you think you're trying to avert a crisis when you actually end up creating one, because you're not being honest and transparent. There's that old saying, it's better to ask for forgiveness than permission. So if something happened, admit it, sorry, this is what happened, is what I'm going to do about it. Begging for permission, and I've done this myself, just gone off and done my own thing, and came back and said, okay, this is what I did, and here's what we're going to do, blah, blah, blah. And if someone said, well, you shouldn't have done that, well, it worked, and nobody was upset, and and get a little tap on the hand, don't do it again. Much better than trying to figure out, this is what I want to do. Well, I don't think you should do it that way. You should try it this way and do that. That's difficult, and so with crisis management, when you're trying to manage a crisis, you got to be honest and transparent. You can't just go ahead and do what you want. You've got to take into account, first of all, people, right? If you can't acknowledge that people are part of the crisis, assuming people are, there could be a crisis, that isn't impacting people, but usually, a crisis includes people. Let's face it. Who was it I was talking about? Professor Lawrence Barton, author of Crisis Leadership Now. He said there's the big three. You have a crisis if there's an impact to people, brand, and money, right? And he's right. You can say facilities as well if you want, and a couple of other things like we say, people, places, and things, which is what I always call it. But you have a major crisis if you've got something that impacts people, your branding, your organizational branding, and the bottom line. And so if you have a crisis that isn't hitting any of those, well, then you don't really have a crisis. You just have maybe a operational incident to deal with, and that's a little bit different. You have your help desks and your technology staff who are doing their investigations and looking into it. You don't have to have press releases. You don't have to get on social media. You don't have to get in front of a reporter or something like that. But if you've got a crisis, you can't manage it the same way. Yes, you still may have people in the background investigating, technology people or business people, but you can't manage it the same way. You can't hide it under the rug. You have to get out there, get the message out there. This is what's happened. This is what we know. This is what we don't know. This is what we're doing. Our next update will be, X time frame, whatever that may be, maybe a half an hour, whatever, and let people know what's happening. And if you don't know something, it's okay to say you don't know. Which was interesting hearing that, years ago. Because I remember when I first started, one of the things that I was told was never admit you don't know something. And maybe that's what's causing some of the crisis with some of these other people. If you don't know, admit it. It's okay not to know. I don't know everything. Which is why I love doing the show. I learning the different perspectives and experiences from people. I learn a heck of a lot, and it's amazing. Sometimes, after 22 years, I can talk to somebody in the industry, James, who was on early this morning, or Larry Barton, who I mentioned, or Regina Phelps, all these people that have been around just as long, if not longer than I have, and talking to them and getting their experiences, it makes me feel like, wow, sometimes I feel like I'm a newbie at this, So if I don't know something, I'm going to say it. I'm not afraid to admit I don't know something. And I think that's what a lot of crisis leaders and people that find themselves in crises misunderstand about crisis management and communications. It's okay to say you don't know. And we're not getting that right now during COVID. There are some leaders, around the globe. I'm not just pointing out one group specifically. It's around the globe. They'll make things up. We've seen it in disasters. I remember the what was it? The Lac Mégantic rail disaster in Quebec a few years back, where the train wasn't secured properly and rolled down with all these fuel tanks into the center of town and blew up and killed 47 people. They didn't know what was going on, so because they didn't know what happened, the leader of the train company, I forget the name of it now. It's bankrupt, I believe. It's gone bankrupt. I mean. Thought, well, I don't know what's going on until I know what's going on. I'll just manage everything here from my office in Chicago, I think it was. And then when he showed up, in the town to talk to everyone, he was a villain. He was not, he did not manage that properly at all. As soon as something happened, get on a plane, get there. Find out what's going on, what you know, and if you don't know something, say we're looking into that. We're going to find it. Whatever the right words are to say it, but just to kind of ignore it, that's a little too harsh. I shouldn't say ignore, but not to acknowledge what you don't know, caused more problems, and shows no compassion. No empathy for people that are impacted, and that really that's what you got to do. In a crisis, you've got to calm people, give them a reassurance that things are under control. You're taking care of it. You're looking into it. You will find the answers, eventually. And every time you learn something, you convey it. And I find with crisis communications that a lot don't do that. Some leaders, would rather prove that look how good I am, look how smart I am, I know everything that's going on, and I'm not a big fan of And again, I'm not pointing fingers of people when they say, some people say, who who are they? That's just making things up. For the most part, they're making things up, and that's not good. So, but we'll see how things change over the coming weeks and months, and hopefully some of these crisis managers learn from their mistakes and convey a little bit stronger, solidified message. Listen to what's going on, what really is happening. If someone really knows what's going on and has the knowledge and skill, then listen to them. Don't ignore them, or contradict them. First of all, you're destroying, your own credibility, but at the same time, that means if people are listening to you, they're not going to listen to the truth, and that could mean, a greater crisis, and that's happening, unfortunately, in a few places around the globe, where people are making things up, and unfortunately, lives are being paid for with those mistakes, which isn't good. So, what I want to say finally is, take a look at your crisis management, and make sure you've got the right people speaking too. You know, um, I know a lot of people say, you can only talk with, with director of crisis communications, or communications in general, for the organization. But I'll tell you now, from just my own perspective, forget business continuity management, disaster planning, emergency management, forget it. If there's any kind of situation, I want to hear from the top guy, the president. If there's a disaster here in Canada, whether it be a train derailment out west where people have been, injured, or worse, or like my Gantique, or you know, um, ships, forest fires, I want to hear from the prime minister, you know, and I don't want to hear a bunch of crap. If he doesn't know something, then say, or find someone who does, and then say. And organizational leaders sometimes think that just the crisis, manager, or the communications person, media spokesperson, is the only person who's going to talk. No, if something happens with, I don't know, Facebook. Let's say something happens with Facebook. I want to hear what Mark Zuckerberg has to say. As an example, I want to know. I want to hear it from him. I want to hear it from somebody, some spokesperson. Sure, they may talk, but at the end of the day, I want to hear what the leader of the company, Mark, has to say, right? So, and a lot of organizations don't do that. They'll just point you to the media person. If you got a question, go to the media person. And maybe that's valid during non-crisis times, but during crisis, if people are involved, your brand is involved, money's involved, impacting clients or customers or employees, whatever the case may be, you want that from the top. You want to know what's going on. If you like that video, thumbs up. If you didn't like that video, thumbs down. But leave me a message and let me know your thoughts. Of course, don't forget to subscribe. And in the meantime, stay prepared, everybody.